What's happening, y'all? It's me coming back at you again with another vid. Now, Rosclot, I know this is my second time responding to you, brother. Don't take it personal. This is no beef. This is just an honest response and a respectful response to you, okay? I know you've been on a temper tantrum ever since the aftermath of the Gennady Golovkin and Kell Brook fight. And I know you are showing your distaste and displeasure over the fact that Kell Brook is getting more praise and credit for his fight against Golovkin more so than Golovkin. And despite the fact that Golovkin is the one who TKO'd him. Okay, I can understand where you're coming from to a degree. I understand that you also said within your second video, following up to the first video, which you responded towards me, you said that you can't understand how a fighter who got TKO'd in the fight gets more praise than the actual victor of the fight who TKO'd him. Okay, well, let me take you down a trip to memory lane, all right? And see, even though you and others kind of disregard history to a degree, it's happened before, man, where we have fighters who've given who's given great courageous performances, and they get praised over the actual victors that actually beat them. Now, for example, the guy before you see here is Chuck Wepner. Now, Chuck Wepner in his career was he was considered a average contender during the 70s, prominent years of the heavyweights. Okay, his greatest win on his record is against Ernie Terrell, and we can all argue that Ernie Terrell was over the hill when Wepner fought him, and and this is the same Ernie Terrell who was a former world champion, Hall of Famer, who Muhammad Ali beat. Okay, and coincidentally, Chuck Wepner got a shot against Muhammad Ali for the world title in the early 70s, and many people, observers, writers, critics, you name it, sports experts, they all were writing, they written off Wepner because they felt that he was a fringe contender. He was a subpar opponent for Ali, and they expected Ali to smoke right through him, to run right through him. Now, apparently that didn't happen, okay? As you can see, Ali had to really fight for his life against this guy right here, to the point that even Wepner knocked down Ali in the 9th round into their fight, okay? To many people's surprises, Wepner outperformed a lot of people's expectations. No one expected him to fight this hard and courageous the way he did. And he took a lot of damage in that fight against Ali, even to the point that, you know what, he wasn't going to let that bother him. He continued to press forward. He continued to apply the pressure against Ali, and eventually even took him to the 15th round, where he did get stopped. But after the fight, he had got so much admiration and respect for his performance, for what he did in overcoming the odds, even though he didn't win the world title. But coincidentally, the guy who witnessed the fight is a famous actor by the name of Sylvester Stallone. He even admitted that watching Wepner perform the way he did inspired him to do the Rocky movie, which we all know now is a franchise icon, and then won an Academy Award for Best Picture. I think Best Actor, Sylvester Stallone got an award for that as well. So anyhow, moving on to the next individual, the Professor, Zvonimir Nelson. Now, in case you may not know, or you already know, Zvonimir Nelson's first world title shot was against a dangerous and prime dominant champion, Salvador Sanchez. Okay, Zvonimir Nelson entered this fight 12-0, and only in his 13th pro fight. And before that fight, he was fighting obscure opposition. Well, that's kind of expected coming from a guy who's a prospect, who's up and coming, and he was fighting these guys in his territorially in Ghana. So he took the fight against Salvador Sanchez on a 2 weeks notice, okay, or less than 2 weeks notice. And many observers and spectators, I should say, expected Sanchez to get through this fight with relatively ease, and they didn't expect Nelson to survive no more than 3 rounds. The reason being is because he was unknown, he was unproven, and so he took Salvador Sanchez to 15 rounds, gave him probably the toughest fight of his career, even though Sanchez knocked him down. But he came back, he hit Sanchez with some ferocious shots in that fight, and though he got stopped in the 15th round, Zvonimir Nelson stock risen after that fight, He went on to become a 2-division world champion, made many successful title defenses, and he became a Hall of Famer. Okay? He got more respect than his opponent, Salvador Sanchez, for his courageous performance. Now on to the next guy, George Foreman. Now, I'm not talking about the George Foreman in the early 70s, where people perceived him as indestructible, very feared, and powerful. I'm talking about the George Foreman who came back in the late 80s, who was out of shape by most observers, way past his best, who looked a lot more sluggish and much slower than his usual self back in his own prime days. Now, George Foreman, after his comeback, he eventually got a shot against Evander Holyfield, the young heavyweight champion, okay? And many people felt that Foreman didn't deserve that shot at all whatsoever. And the reason being is because Foreman didn't fight any top 10 contenders to even earn that shot, even though he was ranked, but he didn't really any top 10 contenders. Many people felt, given the fact that he was way past his best, he was overweight to some degree. Some would say he was out of shape, mentioned, way past his best, a lot slower than normal. He wasn't going to last against a younger, faster, and perhaps maybe a stronger champion than Evander Holyfield. Even though Holyfield was outweighed by Foreman by almost 50 pounds or something like that, or almost 60. I don't know. I forgot the number, but I think it's about almost 50 pounds. He was outweighed by Foreman. But anyways, a lot of people Holyfield to end that fight no later than 5 rounds. But many people surprised. George Foreman performed very well in that fight, and no one thought he could hang against a young, prime, and fast and dangerous champion like Evander Holyfield, okay? Even though he lost that fight in a very decisive way, he got a lot of admiration and respect for his performance and courageous effort against Holyfield. And Holyfield got criticized for that victory as well. It's not so that he didn't do well. He did perform very well in that fight. Let's not get it twisted. But the thing is that, again, people expected him to knock out Foreman. People expected him to stop him or run through him, but he didn't do it. But I felt that's kind of a ridiculous thing to say now, because Foreman was never stopped after his comeback, okay? Nobody was able to stop him. Even the most harder-hitting puncher, Tommy Morrison, couldn't even stop George Foreman. And this is the same Tommy Morrison who hits him much harder than Evander Holyfield. But it is what it is. Okay, and besides that, after that, Foreman became also the oldest world champion in history before Bernard Hopkins broke that record. So what does that say to guys who do get praise after a loss? Now, speaking of Evander Holyfield entered the first fight against Riddick Bowe as the favorite in that fight. Okay, but going into the actual fight, he was getting dominated by Bowe throughout the majority duration of the fight. He was getting out jabbed, he was getting outlanded, he was getting overpowered. And despite the fact that Bowe was fighting a little, maliciously a little dirty in that fight, Evander didn't quit. Okay, yeah, eventually he got knocked down in the fight, but it wasn't until the 10th round that he actually put on a courageous effort. Even though he looked like he was going to get knocked out, he was on the verge of getting knocked out on his feet. But he found a way to withstand the damage and the barrage that Bowe put on him. He did finish the fight, even though he lost in a decisive way. But people gave Evander respect that he couldn't get while he was the heavyweight champion on his first reign. Okay, so yeah, but eventually he did get a rematch against Bowe. He did come in as an underdog, and he won that fight in a majority decision, and he did become the only man to beat Bowe. Now, on to the next one, Vitali Klitschko. Now, Vitali Klitschko, before he fought Lennox Lewis, okay, he has suffered a humiliating defeat, which actually was a bizarre defeat in a way, in the hands of Chris Bird. Now, what happened was Vitali Klitschko quit on his stool after the 10th round, I believe, against Chris Bird. And what's so strange about that situation is that he didn't look like he was hurt. He claimed he had separated his shoulder or something to some degree. I don't know. But it was a very shocking situation because he was actually eating on all 3 judges' scorecards, and he didn't really suffer any damage in that fight. And it really made Larry Merchant, who's always been a fan of his, irate over that situation because he felt that he could have continued to fight for at least 2 more rounds while being up with that injured shoulder, as he claimed he had injured. And Vitali got ridiculed. He was called a coward. He was called all sorts of names to the point that people felt that he shouldn't be boxing, given the fact that he just quit like that, knowing that he was winning that fight with no signs of all him being injured. Okay, so Vitali had to redeem himself, and he had to do it the very hard way. Now, when the Lennox Lewis fight came about, he was a replacement opponent for who was Lennox Lewis supposed to fight? I forgot. But anyways, he was a replacement opponent for Lennox, and he took the fight against him on a 2-week notice. Now, Lennox already dismissed Vitali. I think it was given to the fact that he quit on the stool against Chris Bird, and given the level of opposition that he fought prior to the fight, he felt that this was going to be a cakewalk, and so did many observers. They felt that Lennox was going to walk through Vitali. But what do you know? Vitali gave everyone a surprising performance in that fight. He actually outlanded, outjabbed, and was beating Lennox Lewis before the stoppage. Okay? Yeah. Coincidentally, Vitali got stopped in this fight, even though he was leading on the cards. Okay? But the problem was, yes, he fought a Lennox Lewis that was out of shape, who was, obviously past his best, but that's not the point. The point is that people were expecting Lewis to win that fight and get through it with relatively ease. And yes, that forced Lennox Lewis to fight, to really, really get through that situation and fight, through the barrage and the veracity and the youthfulness of Vitali Klitschko at that time, okay? And Lennox did damage Vitali in a very, very, very grotesque way, okay? He damaged his upper eye, gave it a horrendous gash over above it, and also gave him a big cut underneath that eye as well, which prompted the doctors to stop the fight, okay? Yes, Lennox got the victory, but Vitali was praised more than Lennox because of his courageous effort to get through that fight and take it on a 2 weeks notice. Okay. And what's kind of funny about that is that Larry Merchant, who is the biggest fan of Vitali Klitschko, had tried to get Lennox to admit in their post-fight in-ring interview to admit that Vitali actually gave him one of his toughest fights of his career, given the fact that Lennox had dismissed him. And Lennox, I kind of was disappointed at Lennox for not, in this situation too, because he refused to give Vitali Klitschko credit for his performance for what he did. Okay, even though, despite the fact that he dismissed him as his opponent. And Larry Merchant was badgering Lennox about it. Of course, that frustrated Lennox Lewis, whatnot. But, you guys take a look at that interview. That was very, very funny and awkward. But my point is this, man, is that it has happened in history where fighters do get praised for their performances, even though in a losing effort. And this is exactly why Kell Brook is getting the praise and the respect that he's getting right now. Because many of us, including you, had written him off. Okay? He performed in a situation that no one saw coming. He was leading on the cards, like it or not, however you want to slice or dice it. He was winning the fight. Okay? Yes, Gennady Golovkin did manage to damage his eye. Okay, and he, TKO'd him by a corner stoppage. Okay, that's fine. But you can't dismiss the fact that he gave your fighter the toughest fight of his career so far, and this is a welterweight who didn't even take any fights before taking the fight at 160. Gave Golovkin hell and made him struggle, to made him look bad. That's the bottom line, man. So, yeah. Other than that, and one more thing. You also mentioned that Gennady Golovkin fought smart. No, he did not fight smart. Take a look at his facial scars that he suffered in that fight. I'll post a link to the article below with Sky Sports. I'm out. Peace.